And we're live. Hello and welcome. You're listening to Let's Drone Out. And tonight we are joined by everyone's favourite curry kitten.
Hello.
And everyone's other favourite channel, Painless360.
Hi, Jack. Hello, Curry.
Hello. One of the reasons we somehow survived the YouTube castration of if you haven't got 1,000 followers, we don't want you on our platform. And I'm your host, Bright Till I Fly. Let's start the show. Lee, it's a pleasure to have you on. We've Stephen's away, so it's safe. So you two can not kill each other. No, it's fine. Frank's away. He's at the Royal International Air Tattoo, unfortunately. I can phone Tony to invite him on. He's Tony, if you're listening to this, feel free to come on. I think I'll have to send you the invite. You're uploading, so yes. So I had an earlier on conversation. Lee phoned me up and checked whether this was still happening, and it's been good to hear from you. I feel like the gift of LED lights are doing wonders for the communication between us now. I did really appreciate that.
It has been a very long time since I've been on the show. It's probably been over a year since I've been in LDO. So there's been a lot happened in the last 12 months. But it's lovely to see you on the show as well. Nice to see Curry back. It's that kind of LDO classic vibe tonight. So it's lovely to be able to hang out with you guys and have a chat and have a catch up, because we haven't spoken. You and I have, and Curry I bring occasionally as well. But it's like just to come on the show and talk about the hobby. It's kind of a fun thing to do. Been a long time though.
It has been a while. I have been enjoying your Patreon streams and everything. It's been weird. I've obviously been talking about you to Cole, and I mentioned about the Flip 32 multi-Wii flight controller. There's been a historical revival, as Painless probably groans in disappointment. But Curry's been flying a tricopter lately, and so have I. And yes, so we've kind of gone back to like the 450. Meanwhile, you've been playing around with walk snail and gimbals. Look at that!
Look at that.
That is proper old school. Is that a wooden frame?
This is a wooden frame. This is one my friend gave me. He was clearing out his garage, which is about the same age as my one, which is about 12-year-olds. So my tactic was I keep the original DT750s, the original props. I had to reprint a few of these because they just destroyed themselves because they're just PLA. But I then put on a modern stack. So it's like it's technically I'm doing a review of this ESC board, but I didn't want to do that's boring. I thought I'd put it in something. The F7 flight controller and an FPV, Rush FPV VTX. And the idea is similar to my F450 one I did, is like, can I acro it? Bearing in mind, it sounds, as Jack says, like a lawnmower when it's hovering, because this thing is just chattering back and forth. So look at the wobble on it. The whole thing just shakes. So the most important thing to take with the field to me tomorrow is a bin bag. That's what you need to take on all tricopter flights.
It does sound like it's cutting grass. You know that flat sort of blunt mower slapping grass instead of that nice sheen cut. That's what it sounds like.
That's where you might have a slight advantage with those nice carbon fiber arms and proper looking mounts. My motors are held on by zip ties. Remember the old David zip ties? You need it's traditional.
Same here. I bet Painless, you must be like, oh my god, what is wrong with you two?
I don't have any issue with it at all. I think if you're doing something with a hobby that puts a smile on your face, then you're doing it right. It's just I got rid, sadly, of all the old flight controllers because I end up with a kind of a bin bag. Because, you know, as somebody that does reviews regularly, I'm sure, Wayne, you have the same thing, is you get sent stuff for review and you kind of get them in, you tinker with them, and they end up, you know, you might use them in anger, you might not, you might give them away. And then 5 years later, you find them in a pile and you go, oh, God, these aren't even supported anymore. So I had to clear out. And I did a video where it was literally a bag full of APMs, multi-Wiis, CC3Ds, Nazi 32, Flip 32, all that stuff that we started out in the hobby that I was never going to use again. And it was kind of fun just to go through it because you know that thing where you end up with these little tubs of spares, and the bottom third never really sees the light of day. It just, you know, you just kind of dig down until you find what you want, and then you stop. Well, I actually cleared out the bottom third of all the bins, and it was yeah, I don't have any of that old stuff. But the tricopter thing, I mean, that was something that we all tried back in the day. I mean, and David Winterstall was the bloody reason that most of us did it, wasn't he? He was the tricopter genius.
He put those plans up that made it like sound. It was easy. I built my tricopter knowing nothing about RC or anything. I just saw the videos like, oh, he put a video. He put this big guide of what to do out. I thought I'd try it. Oh, this was my non-tuned one. This is Betaflight default tune, which it's not very happy with.
I don't know whether you'll hear it.
We can't hear it. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a wobbly. Ooh.
It doesn't get much better. Like, this is part 2,
Okay,
by the way.
This is not bad compared to what it was like. I'm saying this is smooth now. It doesn't sound very smooth. I think that's flyable.
That sounds like the sound effect of an aircraft in a World War II movie after it's been shot through the engine, isn't it? When it's kind of struggling back to Dover.
Yeah, it's on like
flames coming
cylinders.
Out. Yeah,
I'm going to ignore the sound, fly it away, and then you can't hear it anymore. That's the plan.
It literally sounds
back in the day, we were just happy if it took off. Back in the day, if it just left the ground, we were over the moon. If it didn't explode in flames or kill anybody, you know, as long as it was in more or less the same number of pieces at the end of the flight.
If I could come back from flying without it in a bin bag because it's crashed again, then I was very happy. It's like the first time that happened, I was overjoyed. I don't have to rebuild it. Hey,
I bought a scratch card and won some money because I was like, I remember the first time I finished a battery several months into the hobby. Sorry, Painless.
It's a fantastic feeling. I think it's one of those things that, yeah, you have to creep up on being able to get to the end of the battery and land, and not just go and, you know, do the walk of shame and try and find it. I was doing a review of a quad the other day, and just got a bit carried away. And it's only a small quad, and it disappeared into because of course all the fields are full of, you know, knee-high grass now, and it went in, and I had to use. I was like, I have no idea where that, because it just. And I had to use the RSSI trick to go and, you know, that thing where you're looking at the amount of signal in your telemetry, and you're walking. You look incredibly silly. It looks like something out of a Doctor Who episode. You're just kind of creeping up on it. And luckily, I remembered this time that in Express LRS, because last time I was on, I don't think Express LRS was the default choice as it kind of is now for lots of part of the hobby. Express LRS, when it gives you the RSSI values, it's measuring the loss, not the value of the signal. So you want the smallest possible value for that. Whereas the first time I ever had a crash with Express LRS, I confidently took off in the direction that was giving me the worst, what I thought was the best signal, but actually it was telling me this is a maximum amount of loss. So I took off in completely 180 degrees the wrong direction. And it was only after I'd been walking for about 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm like, something's really wrong here. That I managed to, because I'm old as well, it doesn't help. I managed to peer at the screen and realize there was a minus sign in front of the DBM. And I was like, oh, come on. Why has nobody told me that? So it turned out, and by the time I got to the quad, the walk snow unit was very, very hot. So yeah, luckily it survived, but it's one of those where you're like, please, battery don't die. Please, battery don't die. Because if I don't find you now, it's going to get found by the combine harvester when it goes over the top.
Oh, that would not be popular.
That would not be popular. So it's one of those fun things. But yeah, so it turns out if you're watching this and you fly Express LRS, if you never use the RSSI trick, test it, because when you need it to use it in anger, you'll forget about it. And if you use an Express LRS, you want the smallest number, because you want. But it actually got me right on it the other day.
It kind of depends what you mean by the smallest number, because one would think minus 100 is smaller than minus 20, whereas minus 20 would be very, very close, and minus 100 would be far away.
You see, this is the challenge when you have an audience, most of which have no idea what a dBm is. And there's a small percentage who actually do know what a decibel is and what the ratio is, and it's a logarithmic scale. So when you say the smaller number, 80% of the audience goes, oh, so minus 20. Because of course, if you're looking at it, it's like, well, it's easy then, isn't it? You go for the minus 100. But it's one of those things. You just have to, in the end, you just have to show it and demo it and go, do this. Because otherwise people go, well, what is that? And also you have the pedantic crowd. That's not actually the smallest number. And you're like, yeah, but I'm trying to explain to somebody who has no idea what I'm talking about. And actually might, like me, not see the minus sign for the first 5 minutes of the recovery. It's kind of one of those fun things. What's this video?
I was slightly baffled with it the first time because I was so used to using regular RSSI, but it does make much more sense. I don't think it makes more sense in my head, but as long as I know that, if we're getting into minus 3 figures, that's a bad thing. And if we're minus 40-ish, then we're close by. That's all I need to know.
That's really interesting that you say that, Curry.
Yeah.
Because about minus 40, minus 45, you're about 6 feet away from the quad. I found on the other day, and I thought it would have gone lower than that before you were on top of it.
I've seen it when I've powered on the desk. I've seen it at minus 20 something. Right. But yeah, generally in the field, if I turn on and I'm stood up, it's around minus 40. That is practically on top of it, then, aren't you? Oh, that's a tricopter. Is this you the other day then, Jack?
Yeah. See, I've definitely got a bit of tail wiggle there, bit of oscillation, and a lot of jello. Sorry, I thought I'd run this in the background and just show you that, make you feel better that. Although your tricopter does sound like a lawnmower, mine's probably not that much better.
Look, as far as I know, I had to clean spiders out of the motors, so there's all sorts of stuff in there. It's the noise it makes is a feature.
Yeah,
not a bug.
We are so out of practice and not very good at a hobby anymore. Both I and Chris G took off without attaching antennas to our goggles. Like, range is pretty bad.
Range is bad, isn't it?
And Frank had to systematically go round and screw antennas onto our faces. So yeah, we're hopeless, man. Like, Jesus, mate. Painless. I'll tell you what. If you want another easy video, how to get back the WD-40 Painless edition of de-rust into the hobby. Remember, signal is improved with antennas. Check your battery level before plugging in.
I have made those videos in the past, but nobody watches them. And then you're trying to help somebody, and then you kind of refer them to those videos. They go, "Oh, that's really useful," because actually those videos are very boring. Because at the moment there's so much stuff on. Content creation is now a job. When we started doing this and playing around on YouTube, it was just something you did for a DOS to help other people out. Now it's a career choice, but those kind of videos don't get the same kind of traction as, you know, those thumbnails that we all love, you know, the game changer, or you won't believe this happened, ... You know, all that stuff that we have to sit through now. You know, having it like, here's the top 10 things to make sure you don't crash. Everyone's kind of go, you know, I'm gonna watch the next, you know, controversial video from such and such, and that's where people get to it. So yeah, it's an interesting idea, and have done it in the past. But I find that it doesn't take very long, if you haven't been flying regularly, for you to go to the field, and that automatic little systematic way that you set yourself up has kind of, you get there and you're like, oh, this used to be like, you know, you'd open the case, you'd take the quad out, you'd plug, and then you'd flip that oven, turn the radio on, and then you put that. Because, for example, one of the things that I noticed the other day was that I'll have to, if I've got someone with me, I'll do FPV and they'll do the hack cam, the infamous hack cam with the GoPro on the thing. If I'm just on my own, I'll just fly line of sight, but I'll record the FPV. I'll have the goggles around my neck. But what I do, so what you have to do is you have to take the goggles out the bag first and put them around your neck, plug in the battery and power them on if it's the version 1 of the walk snails, because they have a power button. Then you put your cap on, and then you have to check in your phone thing that the cap's on straight, because everyone gets very upset if you record it and it's on at a slight angle. But the last 3 or 4 times I've been flying, I've put my cap on, sorted it all out, and then lifted the goggles up and gone, oh, I'm gonna have to do that all again. So there is like a little, and when you've been flying at the end of the season, it's you know, it's dead automatic. You do it all, boom, 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 and everything's all set. We had a flying day at the start of the season where my friend brought one of his little planes that's bound to one of the little Radio Master radios, not one of the big ones. What's the really small one called? Not the
Pocket.
Is it? No, not
Pocket.
the Pocket. It's the one that's like a game controller.
Zorro.
That's it. Thank you, the Zorro. And he got the Zorro out and found that the batteries weren't charged in his Zorro. And it was like, oh, rookie mistake. But once by the end of the season, you remember that you have to charge your GoPro, the batteries for your quads, the batteries for your radio. You know, you have all this prep that you do, and the first 3 or 4 flights are always a little bit clunky. And you get to the field and you think, oh, I haven't got the strap, or, you know, I mean, these days I put XT60 covers on a lot of the batteries when they get stuck away. And they're actually really handy they're part of the little routine to get everything ready. But I have these I even made a card that was like, because somebody wanted to like a pre-flight check. You know, if you go to the field, what are the things that you need to check? Because with a quad, it's one thing, but if you're flying, you know, a fixed wing, there's lots of other things that you got to check. So, you know, are your control surfaces still okay? Have they been ripped off? Are your servos knackered? Has the linkages come loose? Are they still moving in the right direction? Does it look like they're trimmed okay? Is your center of gravity all right? You know, and wrote this big list out, and it helped that person. But in terms of people being interested to watch that video, maybe I need to make more exciting thumbnails, you know, do this or you'll crash. One of those kind of thumbnails, rather than just, you know, top 10 things to do when you get to the field. I think that's maybe a trick I'm missing, really. But I'm still not trying to fall into the entertainment versus education. You know, there's so much stuff going on in the hobby all the time. And I am struggling to keep up with the stuff that's going on as it is, even with my output. You know, that's what 4 videos a month, 4 videos a week typically is what I've done. I've actually throttled it back the last 4 or 5 weeks as I'm kind of planning to what summer looks like. But even with that, I've still got a massive list of things that people have asked me to talk about, or common issues I'm getting, common questions, new technology, stuff that needs flight reviews. You know, it's always going on, and it hasn't slowed down. How are you finding it, Wayne?
Well, I think you're doing a cracking job getting that much out, because I think I'm barely doing 1 a week at the moment. But I tried to take this approach recently of doing less pure reviews, and if someone wants to send me something, either it has to be interesting or I have to make it interesting. Hence, like, can I send you the CSC board? Yes, but I might be a while because I want to build it on something stupid. Is that okay? Yeah, fine. And we'll do that. So it's yeah, there's a backlog, and there's other bits and bobs I know are coming. It seems to be a particular busy time at the moment, which is, at least that's coincided with the weather being reasonable. So I'm going to go out tomorrow, and I'm going to take 2 quads of my tricopter with me to get some filming done, and that can then make 3 videos. Thank goodness. But yeah, there's I wouldn't say I wouldn't say there's huge game changer things coming out all the time. I think there's interesting things coming. I saw you got the new Walk Snail goggles and the did you get the gimbal thing? Which all look you got it ready. Which all look kind of interesting. I think that's quite cool. And of course they're putting the code in there for the goggles X, aren't they? And the new little ones. So it's nice that Walk Snail's trying and coming up with new stuff. Everybody else, not so much. I'm finding it's kind of like we've got to something where things just work very well. So there's always a sort of, it's like what you've seen before but slightly different. So it's always nice to try and make it slightly different if possible, or try and look for things that are trying to do it slightly differently.
Is that part of the whole reason, kind of circling back to tricopters? Because that's definitely a place where there's more tinkering to be done. Yeah,
I mean, the reason for that is, like, my friend was cleaning out his garage. He wasn't going to fly any of the stuff, so he gave me his old 450, which has already been on the exciting acro journey, which was, wow, frightening and quite an experience, but fun to do. And he's like, oh, I've got this old one. I thought, oh, that's good, because I've never tried acroing a tricopter. My one it's sitting up there, such sentimental value. I just take it out and stroke it occasionally. But I was like, oh, fine, I can smash yours up. That won't matter. So anything where, you know, I can take stuff up and have a go. And the fun thing with that as well is he gave me one of his old planes, which is, I forgot what they're called now. They were sold by Hobby King, and they were the ones wing shape, and they could take off from water as well. I can't remember what they're called, but I thought that's fun. And he had his really old OSD that he never got working. He had the what was it called? I think it was the RV OSD. It was really sort of futuristic for the time, back like 10 years ago.
The Immersion RC one, the Easy OSD, are you?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
Another one.
Down here. Let's see if I find it. I just happen to have it down here because it's ready to try it. It is called, you might recognize it from the size of the thing. Yeah, RVOSD, which looks like this. Back in the day, it was a really quite advanced,
yeah, it was
fixed wing OSD, and it had very, very impressive, like sort of fonts and little dials that moved. And I remember we had it in his wing, and he bought it. It was all very excited. He's like, we were testing it out. We were holding the wing, and we were doing this, like the surface just moved, put it up in the sky, flying it along. And whenever he said, right, I'm now engaging angle mode, it would instantly just turn over and start going into a dive. And I thought, well, that would be fun to put on a plane and see if we can get it working again. Because there's no reason for it, apart from the fact that it's a fun tinkering thing. And it was technical in the day, and now I want to see if it will work, or I will murder a plane with it.
I think it's interesting because a lot of the people that I bump into in the hobby are like, I think I can speak for you guys because, you know, we've known each other a long time now. We all have engineering brains. We like to tinker, and we like to mess around, and we like to do something a little bit different. And you know, the idea of buying something that you literally take out the box and it's all ready and finished is, you know, it's kind of half the fun is actually building and setting up and problem solving and doing that stuff. And it scratches parts of our brain that, you know, back in the day, I was joking with Jack the other day and saying, if we'd been born 100 years ago, we'd have been building bridges for Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Well, that kind of, our brains work that way, right? But we don't have that. So we have this radio control hobby stuff, which kind of, you know, lets us do that. And it's really interesting that you guys are getting involved in some of the slightly more wacky, esoteric stuff. And I don't know whether that's part of it, because I know at the moment with the stuff that I'm doing, I am constantly at the leading edge of stuff. So I never ever get to feel like Jack was discussing about, it's a quad. The quad's kind of perfected now. We have like 4 different flavors. You have the Whoop, the Cine Whoop, you have the 5-inch, and you have the Endurance. And we have these different classifications for basically what's the same bloody thing. It's refined to a point now where you can just go and buy what you need. And back in the early days, I remember you talking, Wayne, about the first tricopter you built was 3 GY F01 gyros from helicopters. I think you were that early on.
Well, that's what I remember seeing on David's page, and I was like, what is a gyro and where do I get one? Unfortunately, but when I actually built it, he'd said, oh, there's this KK1 controller around. I was like, oh, this is better. I don't know what those gyro things are, but maybe I can find one of these. And that's how he fortunately listed all the parts out. And just go to this Hobby King website and you start putting things in your basket, and you just do it like that. But that was pretty early.
I think there are lots of us who a big part of the hobby is the messing around with technology and having fun with it. I can see some people in the comments are talking about the fact that the idea of bind and flies, because Mr. Clean Flights shout out to Dominic, the father of Betaflight and iNav ultimately, or grandfather, I guess, at this point. We owe so much to Dominic, and I do need to say this, and I would say it even if he wasn't here. The reason that we have Betaflight, the reason that we have iNav, the reason we have all this other stuff, even things like Rotaflight, you can draw a direct line to the work that Dominic did back in Clean Flight days to make Baseflight a project that people could actually develop on. So, Dominic is one of the heroes of the hobby, and we don't talk about him enough. So it's nice to see him in the chat. But back when Dominic was doing his stuff with Clean Flight, the only way you could get a quadcopter was to buy all the discrete parts. The motors were usually, back then, motors designed for aircraft, fixed wing aircraft that we were repurposing, the 2212 950 kV or whatever it was with, and we were using props from aircraft, fixed wing aircraft as well. They weren't designed for thrust. They were designed for kind of more efficiency. And we cobbled these things together and we got them to fly, and we were just over the bloody moon, and it was great. And now, it's almost, I'm going to say it's almost too easy now to make a quad. I built one. It's probably the 7th, 8th quad that I've built on the channel over Christmas, and that was using a Speedy B 35-pound frame, a Speedy B stack, some T-Motor motors, and some Gem fan props, and I put a walk snail unit as well. And it was so easy. All the ports that I needed were there. All the connections that I needed were there. I didn't have to edit any code. I just flashed it and told the ports what I wanted them to use in Betaflight, and everything burst into life. I didn't have to spend hours and hours scratching my backside thinking, well, that didn't work, did it? And in the old days, you'd sit there with the video, pre-YouTube days, you'd download all the stuff from the forums and hope that there was nothing dodgy in the video file. You'd download it and you'd sit there and you'd watch, and you'd literally be going along. And I think we have lost a little bit of that fun element in the standard part of the multi-rotor part of the hobby, because everything has been so refined. It doesn't quite snap together like Lego. We're not quite there, but it is. It doesn't scratch the same itch. I think
it's true. I think what we're doing is we're reminiscing in a way. It's a bit like, we've got like very expensive computers or like Xbox Series X consoles, but everyone likes to go back and occasionally play a Mega Drive or a SNES game. Not that that's particularly easy to connect to your TV right now, and you might have to blow on the cartridge to get it working and stuff like that. And it's a bit like flying old stuff. It's like you're going back to the struggle of trying to get it in the air, but remembering the pure joy, even just hovering. Oh my God, it got into the air. I've done something. I've made a thing. as opposed to it is. I mean, it's fun to fly and stuff, but it's just like, okay, it does much the same as the last quad did, because they're all pretty easy now and they all just work. So getting something a bit silly or doing something with a plane that makes it silly, that's where my scratch the fun itch for me at the moment. Just doing something like that, or doing something really old and see if it still works.
What I wouldn't give for a Doge OSD.
I think the first ever OSD I had was an Immersion RC Easy OSD, and it was like it was over £100, and it went on the top of a Nazi 32 quad 3S, and it was this massive, great loader board, similar to the thing that you had, Curry. That it was kind of all gaffer taped on the top. And the first time I ever flew it, my goggles steamed up, and we ended up smashing it in a field because I couldn't see where I was going. So I was just like, I'm just going to dump it. So luckily my spot was like, oh, I've got a rough idea where that is, mate. And we kind of went and we recovered it. But the first ever time flying with an on-screen display just blew my mind. But what I very quickly realized was that I had to declutter the OSD, because I see this happen a lot, is when people get into the hobby, they don't want to, when they're very new, they don't want to like learn the basics first and make a basic 5-inch quad. They want to build a quad that'll do 20 kilometers and fly for an hour and a half, and they want to do special things and add an Arduino that does this, that, and the other, and these sensors. And how do I build one of them? And I don't think they like my answer, which is, look, just build a basic 5-inch quad first and learn what the art of the possible is like, and then from there you can kind of figure out how to do all the extra stuff. Everyone kind of wants to go in at the deep end, and when they do, you find that when you look at the like the dump file and the OSD layout, it's literally got everything turned on. It's like like lace around the edges of the image.
It's like flying through a doily.
It literally does. It looks like you're looking through the hem of grandma's dress, and it was ridiculous. And there was a whole thing where I went through a stage where I was trying lots of things, like having different OSD tabs, so I could have one depending on the flight mode I was in for what I was doing. But these days I try and keep it as uncluttered as is humanly possible, because I find that otherwise I'm constantly looking at, oh, how fast am I going? Oh, how high am I? Oh, what milliamp hour? Oh, I've hit a tree. I need to keep my eyes in the middle of the screen. I can't, particularly as you get a bit slower and a bit older, I can't react quick enough to avoid everything.
I used to call my friend used to fly on an APM, and he did very well. We used to fly AXNs back in the day, and he built all these really clever little the planes. Bruce X-Jet used to fly them all the time, the little AXNs. Okay. Quite a thin nose. You had to sort of scoop bits out to fit 2200 in. And there was really no room for a flight controller, but he'd managed to fit this APM in by building all these little connecting shelves. It was very clever. But his OSD looked like an Excel spreadsheet. It was just everything. I was like, what? I don't know what I'm doing. And it's like, why have you got this height, which is height above ground level, when we don't know where the ground level is? This is above sea level rather than where you took off from. This is
the crazy. ASL stuff. Why do you need to know that?
Well, I tell you what though, talk about people going on and just wanting to like go and do everything. What constantly gets me about guys starting off is no one ever learns to land. They can fly forward very fast, which you just do by tilting your camera up and going, meow. But instead of landing, they just just turn off when I'm near the ground, and we'll cartwheel a bit, and I'll go get it. It's like, I can't do that. I'm in this horrendous muddy field, which is either full of cows or mud, and I have to land on this bit here. And if I don't, my quad will sink. And nobody else has bothered learning that. They're just like.
I think everyone takes those. I was given a big landing mat. It's a branded thing of one of these companies, and that is bloody brilliant, because I'm the same as you, because I want to fly these things, and some of the fields that we fly in are agricultural, so they're pretty well maintained. Some of them have been industrial historically, so whenever you land, 40% of the soil is actually rust, ferrous oxide, and that just gets sucked straight up into it. So you daren't land anywhere. You have to be really safe. So no, I'm with you. But then again, lots of people don't like this opinion either. I think that lots of pilots jump over the line of sight thing into FPV because FPV is the main part of the hobby now. And then if FPV fails, there's no fallback. If you hit your thing for the GPS rescue mode, if it's beta flight, and you cross your fingers and hope you've set it up okay. Whereas I've had a couple of instances recently where a friend has turned on some kit that, in theory, we've tested everything before we start flying, and then somebody, 10 feet behind will just test something, and I'm flying and go, and I'm like, brilliant, can't see a thing. And then it's up to either return to home, or if you're close enough, whip your goggles up and desperately try and figure out where the bloody thing is. I mean, because the issue with the quads is that there's no orientation clues at all, is there? It's that this will look the same from every orientation. In the old days, at least we used to have great big bloody antennas out the back, or LEDs, which we don't seem to have these days. Different colour, but do you remember that? We had red. You could. Did it actually make any difference?
It didn't, and it was especially when we're flying bigger ones. Tricopters have this optical illusion, so it should be like two arms and that one arm is going to be obvious, but in any, depending how you look at it, it's like it could be different ways, and the same as just an X. And of course, you can't see coloured props at any distance, and it's like, okay, is that an X coming towards me or going away from me? And it's just a case of like, I'm going to put it in angle mode, I'm going to push forward and see if I can determine which way it's going, and then I'm going to try and figure it out from there.
Yeah. What really helped was doing a line of sight with fixed wing. That you kind of your aileron wobble is actually the easiest way to figure it out. Is rather than pitch forwards and backwards, is actually just go do a roll side to side, and if it's with the stick, it's facing away from you. If it's the other way round, it's facing towards you, and if it's side to side, then you just need to spin it until you can see one of those, because that's the only way you can kind of do it with a plane. But it is. I've got friends who can do line of sight really well, and they can always get their quad or plane back irrespective of what happens. And I've got guys and girls I know that are just FPV pilots, and I get it, but it just means there's no fallback if something happens to the FPV signal. So I was reading today about somebody that complaining that their walk snail unit was overheating. They're out in Florida, so yeah, I imagine, what is it, 34 degrees or something out there at the moment. I imagine, yeah, unless you've got the walk snail in airflow, probably is going to get bloody warm. Because even in a warm sunny day here in the UK, you don't want to plug the HD system in and just sat there soaking before you fly. I have all of mine on a separate little power connector. So a lot of my planes are obviously iNav. Once iNav has got a GPS lock, telemetry set, and it's ready to go, then I've got a little JST connector for the power for the walk snail, and that's literally the last thing that gets plugged in. And then when it's thrown, hopefully it's going to stay cool. It usually does. But it's one of those fun things at the moment. I'm hearing a lot of people complaining that their HD systems are overheating in the heats.
They do go quickly, don't they? I've got this little fan on my desk, so whenever I need to plug the walk snail in, because obviously you need to power up the quad as well to like do an update or something, it has to get very quickly behind the fan, else I can't connect the USB.
I have exactly the same kind of thing. This is one of those little handheld power fans. And it's designed to sit and blow on the walk snail unit. I mean, even the thing is, the DJI stuff gets warm. They all get warm because we're actually asking an awful lot of processing power out of this little box. And these days, the case is essentially a big bloody heatsink. If you take the top off any of these units, there's big blobs of thermal paste on these chips, desperately trying to get some of the stuff out, because they try and make this stuff ribbed for your pleasure. you know, to try and increase the cooling. But ultimately, does it make that much difference? I think if it's in the middle of a plane, I don't think it does. There was a couple of quick questions just about this, because we talked about this and I saw them scroll off the top. So just FYI for people who are watching, and this isn't any kind of advertisement, this, thank you, FX Node, is Walksnail have released 3 gimbals, a GM1, GM2, and GM3. They obviously put a huge amount of effort into thinking those names. This is the GM3. So it has 3-axis movement. Interestingly, the GM1 and the GM2, you'd have thought the GM1 would have just been pan, the GM2 would have been pan and tilt. They're not. So I think obviously someone was smoking something on that day when they came up with that. The way this works is that the camera actually connects to the gimbal. So hopefully you can see that on this. There we go. The camera's finally focused on it. And the cable goes into the avatar unit. Crucially, the really smart thing is that the control for the gimbal is actually coming from the avatar unit. So that little cable that you can see there goes into the gimbal directly, and the head tracker unit that's in the Walksnail goggles is sending the head tracker information directly to the Walksnail unit. So you don't need a radio, you don't need to take it through the radio in things like the trainer port stuff. It's actually quite clever. And then how the gimbal reacts and how you set it up is actually all available in a menu in the Walksnail system. Now, the reason it looks like this is this, I'm not going to fly it like this. It's missing wings and lots of other things. This is the battery hatch for my Reptile Dragon 2, which some of you may have seen the review on. It's a big twin. And I got it in specifically because it's designed, look at that for a battery hatch. It's reinforced. It even has supports. It's like somebody actually thought about this. So I've designed and 3D printed this thing today because one of the things, that's the very bare. So that battery hatch, it's got Walksnail in the nose in that picture. But the idea is I'm going to pull the Walksnail out of the nose, because otherwise those 2 antennas are going to kind of be in the way. So this is the replacement that's going to go on the top. Not sure how it actually performs in practice. We're going to see, but I'm very excited about the idea of having head tracking that just works and is simple, and that I don't have to have some kind of cable going from my goggles into the radio, which you can set the Walksnail system up to do that. But the idea that you know, if you had it with a car or a boat or anything, I think it's really, really cool. The problem is that we're getting expensive again, because the gimbal's about 100 quid. The avatar unit's 100 and odd quid. So that's what, 230 pounds, 250 quid. I've mounted it on a battery hatch. I might regret that. But if something happens to this, but this is there for their Moonlight camera with an ND filter. It's beautiful stuff. I just hope it bloody works. That's the only thing, because Caddx definitely have been very busy.
Hatch.
It's the magnets on it are ridiculous. The Reptile, like I say, I've never seen another battery hatch where they've actually reinforced a battery hatch with balsa spars. It's the first one I've ever seen on that kind of plane, and it's one of those. I think
is it?
Not sure. There's wooden inserts. Let's call them that.
Okay. No.
But normally this thing would flex like Billio. But it's actually pretty good. So we'll give it a shot. We'll give it a fly and see how it goes. But when Walksnail told me about, because obviously the new goggles have the head tracking thing in it, I assumed when they said that was in it, that what that meant was we're going to have a cable from the bottom going into the top of the radio and set it up like we've used head trackers forever. I didn't realize that what they've done is they've made it so the signal goes directly from the goggles to the gimbal. How does that work at range and that stuff? Yeah, that's a Trinity head tracker. Fat Shark. But so So hopefully that answers for those of you that were interested in how that works. The other thing that Curry was talking about is support for these gimbals is actually already added to iNav 8. So iNav 8 already has all of that stuff. So you're going to be able to do things with it with iNav 8, which makes me very happy because obviously I'm an iNav fan. I've loved that project since it was started by Constantine back in the day.
I enjoyed chatting to Constantine. FX Node asks, is there any lag?
We shall try it and we shall see.
Tune in to Painless. Link in the
Tune
description.
into Painless. Stay tuned. I need a reasonably still day. I'm going to need moral support because the thing is, I haven't flown a head tracker in a very long time. I set one up. I set a couple of ones up with Hobby King. It was actually quite cheap and nasty, kind of a pan and tilt setup. And I put it on a Bixler or two, and it was okay, but it wasn't great because it was just using kind of servos rather than, this is a proper gimbal with little, stepper motors in it. So when you moved, it was, it was kind of that clunk, clunk, clunk thing. And if you've ever done any head tracking and it does have a lag, it makes you feel quite queasy. It's like that VR thing that you sometimes get. So we'll see. I don't know whether it's going to lag. I also, because it's coming from the goggles, if that means that, because in the Walksnail goggles, one of the antennas, so in the Walksnail goggles, this antenna transmits and the rest listen. So this has got to be the one, because this is going to get the head tracker updated firmware this month. Oh, probably shouldn't have said that, but anyway, said it now. So this is going to be sending out the head tracker stuff. So what happens if this doesn't hear it? If there's a bit of a hiccup, does that mean what happens to the gimbal? Does it stay in position? How smart is it? Don't know. I think we just need to fly it and see.
I think it'll default to just looking backwards at the floor, as they will do when they go wrong.
Yeah, we shall. Yeah, and hopefully it's not going to have to survive too many crashes, because it's a beautiful, stable plane. I wouldn't strap this amount of money onto the top of anything else, because other that tendency to flip over, that would be bad. But hopefully that big thing will be fine.
I think it'd be good. I've had friends that, like back in the day, the old 3-axis gimbals and cameras in there, and even before, like the stabilization that the Moonlight kit will give you, they look really good. It creates a really interesting effect if you sort of have it facing forward, and then you turn the plane. Sometimes you just get sort of this third-person view of the plane going around, and you can see it there. I think it's going to be quite exciting if it works.
I as somebody that can have done some micro lighting and things like that, you tend to look into the turn anyway. And actually, if you think about it from driving your car perspective, you don't kind of continue looking straight out the windscreen. You start turning and then just hope that the road you're turning into doesn't include small children. You actually do. It's quite natural for you to look in the direction that you're going to go, and then for the vehicle to kind of come around in the direction that you're looking. So it's actually more natural than you think. It's just we're so used to in FPV land, just having one fixed view. It's going to be interesting to see how it actually works. I'm genuinely excited about this. This is one of the few things that I've been really excited about, because I was talking to Jack before. My ambition when I started all this FPV rubbish, God knows how many years ago, was I wanted to feel the way that I did when I had those wonderful dreams of flight. You get them once in a blue moon, and you're able to fly through the sky, and you can see the houses and all that fantastic kind of Peter Pan effect. That's what I wanted from FPV. HD FPV gets you close, but I'm hoping being able to look around as I'm, would actually be the missing thing that makes it feel a little bit magic. Hopefully it does, and just doesn't basically stuff the plane into the ground because I'm not looking where I'm bloody going. We shall see. somebody saying Trinity Drift Tracker, right where it belongs, not in the goggles. Troll 3 droid. Yeah, that's the issue. I don't know that the issue that you have with a lot of these head trackers is the readings from the IMU change as the IMU warms up. So with a head tracker, you were always supposed to, and nobody ever did, you're supposed to have the goggles powered for several minutes in the environment that you're going to fly them in, you know, in the sunshine in Florida or whatever it is, and let the system warm up and then center everything and then fly. Because if you fly too quickly, as the goggles and the circuitry warm up, then you will get that drift. The way to get around it is actually to try and it's a 9 DOF. If you're, God, you remember DOF? We used to talk about DOF a lot in Flight Controller Land. Degrees of freedom. Well, it's got 6. No, mine's got 9. And then someone came up with 12. And I'm not sure how that exactly worked. But the idea was you had 3-axis gyro, a 3-axis accelerometer, and you had a 3-axis compass. And the compass is actually a really good way to help with the drift, because in theory, you know, a compass shouldn't change the heading it reads as the IMU warms up. So by adding that in, you can get much better. I don't think the Trinity had it. Interestingly, looking in these warp snail things, it looks like it has a compass as part of the head tracker array. If it does, that'll be quite good. I hope it doesn't drift. I'm going to be very sad because it literally took me 2 hours to design that 3D printable piece this morning.
Well, I think there is a way of recentering. It's like a 3-button press, isn't it, on the goggles?
Yeah, the middle button on the side of the goggles L. See, I've got the props today, boys. So on the side of the goggles L, that middle button, if you press it 3 times, that recenters everything. So that's the way they did it, which I'm really pleased about, because when they sent this, I was like, how do you recenter the gimbal? Because that wasn't written down anywhere. And they said, oh, you press that 3 times. I was like, okay. It actually works okay, but it's like, yeah, I wasn't going to figure that out without it being taught. The only thing wrong with these, they didn't make them wide enough for glasses.
I'm devastated.
I think I saw on their Facebook page they were talking about their little lens inserts today.
Yeah, I think, like, I expect, you know, going back to the gimbal thing, I expect they will make the gimbals that a simple pan and a pan and tilt. Because one thing Walksnail does do very well is they do listen. And unlike a lot of Chinese companies, they do take constructive criticism quite well. Whereas a lot of other Chinese, I mean, you must have the same thing. You go back to them, you go, oh, that's not very good. And, you know, you kind of get that stony silence. You don't get the reply.
I have some suggestions for you. No, we're going to do it our way. Thanks all the same.
No. I'm sure. You know, people will be fine. Yeah, great. Okay, I'll cover it in the video then. But yeah, it's been quite good. I am pleased with the Walksnail system. And although it sounds like I'm flogging this, please do not take, if you're listening to this, do not take that away from this. There are lots of HD systems available on the market. None of them are perfect. All of them have flaws. Do your own research would be my advice, because you would think, looking at YouTube, that, you know, some pundits are, you know, this is the way to go. Walksnail just happens to work for me, and a big part of that is because I'm a fixed wing and a quad pilot. I do both, and it actually works really well for both. So yeah, I'll caveat everything I'm saying with that, because it's one of those weird things. I don't know if you find it, but there's these little. We've always had camps in the hobby who are very defensive of their particular position. So if you say anything that is any way derogatory or could be construed as derogatory to their position, they just get very annoyed at you. And the problem is, you know, everyone has an opinion. I did this video the other day about why I hate best and better. I don't know if you saw that one, because the number of things that you read, DJI is better, or no, HD Zero's best. And you have all these comments under a Walksnail video, and then you go and see the DJI video, and everyone goes, "Oh, DJI, I wouldn't trust them as far as I can throw them. Walksnail's better." Full stop. And you kind of go, well, that's neither use nor bloody ornament, because what's better and best for me, which kind of, I guess, finishes the point I was making, is not necessarily better and best for other people. And a lot of people, a lot of viewers, I think, watch content creators that they trust and take everything they say at face value. And one of the things I have under all my videos is go and do your own research. Don't take what I say as gospel. I'm quite clear about why I like this stuff. Yeah, I mean, if you're a pilot that wants the same things, that flies the same way, that has the same experiences and the same expectations, then yeah, that's probably a good choice for you. But there's a bit more fannying about with Walksnail than there is with other systems, because it's designed to work with all the iNav and Betaflight and sneaky FPV's fonts. You've got these third-party apps now that you can recreate the OSD. It's the whole, it's integrated into things like iNav. It's a whole ecosystem. So if you're not willing to play and tinker, you won't get the best out of it, because the default fonts aren't great.
I think it's people also justifying their purchase when they have a go. It's not like, I think it's better, it's I bought this one, thus I want it to be best, which is, as you say, it depends who you are. There's another camp of people, of course, that will say, well, I don't want this, I want access to the source code, I need an open source solution. Not many, but they're very enthusiastic about it when they do talk about it.
I'm a fan of the open source projects. I must admit, as time has gone on, the first thing I really got exposed to was that multi-WE code, and then Dominic was really kind and generous with his time when he got into Clean Flight, and he helped me understand and get my head around that in the early days. And I just like the whole open source, the way it works. It does require a little bit more effort because the manuals are terrible. The documentation always lags. None of the developers really want to do the documentation. So, you have that whole thing. But actually these days, a lot of these projects, if you look at what they were like when they started out, the documentation is miles better these days than they've ever been. And you've got people like you and me and others making videos. So if reading a 20-page document isn't the way that you absorb information, there's loads of other ways that you can go now and have kind of easily step through all the processes via a video. Because I learn visually. I'm one of those people that, although I can read a manual and I can get it, if I can watch a video and somebody shows me the 5 steps, I'm like, bingo, got it, I can do that now. I just think that the closed source stuff, for me, I don't find it as interesting. And I think it's going back to what we talked about before, that tinkering aspect, the fact that there is that integration with these other open source projects, and the sum becomes greater than the value of it becomes greater than the parts, because on a Walksnail plane with Sneaky's fonts and a Walksnail system, it is fantastic. It's really good, but you do have to go through 6 other videos to get to the end for it to all work really, really well. But for me, that's interesting. For me, that scratches that itch. It's not going back to use an old flight controller, because I'm constantly having to email manufacturers whose documentation isn't quite there. Like, how do you center the head tracker? Because you haven't written that down. But that's a constant thing with me. I'm always doing it. And particularly, I don't know if you get sent a lot of this stuff, the beta stuff for testing. Sorry for the air quotes. And a lot of the things that you get in, the hardware is about right. It's about final, but they're constantly revving the firmware and the settings. So you get to the point where you're ready to take it to the field and fly, and they go, "Oh, actually, here's a new bit of firmware. You need to update the whatever it is with this latest thing." And you kind of go, "Great, well, I can't fly now until I've done that, because if I fly it," because I had a plane in the other week. It was an unusual plane. I don't know if you saw it. It was one that had the body was slung under the wings as like a separate secondary hull. and that's where the camera and the flight controller and things were in. It's a bit of an unusual thing.
I've seen those ones before.
Yeah, it's a higher hand Firefly, I think is what it's called. And the really interesting thing is that it was a pre-production unit, and they were clear it was pre-production. And a number of people, as soon as they got the plane, made a flight review video. And I was kind of going, I'm not doing that until it's got the same configuration, firmware, and setup as what a customer is going to get. Otherwise, there is no point in me, I feel, doing a flight review video, because if I do a flight review video and there are issues and I point those issues out, which have subsequently been fixed by the settings that the manufacturers sent everybody else, then that doesn't represent the product very well. Similarly, if I fly it and it works really well, and then subsequently they do something that makes it worse, I'm misrepresenting it too. And I think there's definitely this weird thing at the moment where there's such pressure to do your videos first that in the old days, we'd get something and we might tinker with it for 3 or 4 weeks, and then we'd make our considered review. And there seems to be so much pressure on now. If they've had it 3 or 4 minutes before they're making the video, we're probably doing okay. And I'm sorry, you cannot get a full breadth, deep understanding of the product, its performance, if you've only had it a day and you've done 2 flights on it. If you live with it and you learn all its foibles and the stuff you like and you don't, that's the point, in my humble opinion, where you have enough experience to make a useful review. And I think too much of the content creation that we're doing at the moment, like I said before, I think content creation is now considered a viable career option. It's about just getting paid to just create the content. And a lot of the channels that are out there are getting paid by the manufacturers to make the videos that they do because of the audience that they have. And if they're getting paid to do a video, then it's not a review, it's an advertisement. And they're not being clear about that. I know that's happening quite a lot. And I just wish people were a bit more honest, because if you see 10 videos and 9 of them says something's amazing, and one of them that's the considered one says, who are you going to believe?
And probably that last one comes out 3 weeks after the first 9, so it's already done and dusted at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, you've already placed your order, so it's on its way. So even you go, he doesn't know what he's talking about, it'll be fine, and then you're into that justification thing that we talked about before, where I've spent 300 quid on it. I'm going to justify why that was a good. It's going to be great. Although, to be fair, I'll tell you what, I had a plane in this week. It's one of a new, like this classic Bixler Skywalker style, where you have the motor and prop at the back on a kind of dorsal nacelle, and you have a thin nose, high wings that kind of go up at the ends. That classic design that's been around forever. There was a new plane listed on Banggood, and I had to go with the little Ranger Volantex 600mm trainer things.
So you're thumbnail on it here.
I actually really loved it. It was really good fun. Because I used to do a lot of Bixler flying back in the day. I used to love Bixlers. They were like 60, 70 quid. And if you smash one, then, it wasn't the end of the world. Anyway, this thing was about 170, 180 pounds. So I thought, okay, and it's a new one. This has got to be the modern interpretation of that classic Skywalker Bixler Volantex Ranger style. Let's get one in and have a look, because I had that experience with a small Volantex Ranger. Let's see what the state of the art looks like. And it arrived. The video's out next month, so everyone that's listening to this, you can just skip that one when it comes out. But it was something that if we'd have got it 8-10 years ago, would have still said, "No, it's a bit like everyone else, isn't it?" And this thing is and it's 180 quid. And it hasn't got room for a flight controller or a stabilizer. There's no thought of where you put a GPS. There's no thought about where FPV equipment would go. There's no CG marks molded in the underside of the wing. For Christ's sake. There is things like there's no carbon fiber reinforcing rods in the control surfaces. The servos are plastic analog. And it's just like,
Wow.
I'm sorry, if I spent 170, 180 quid for this, I would be desperately trying to hide it from the lady wife before she found out that on the credit card. But it's really interesting. The still, I thought we were past the phase of where things were brought out that were expensive and really didn't deliver, because we lost a lot of that when the bubble burst after the quad thing 5-6 years ago.
Maybe they've just found the mold for the old Bixler style, and they're just like, oh, we'll just make that. Like, chuck on a couple of dollar servos, and we're away.
I just put in a ELRS receiver in the Bixler last week. Thank you, Lee.
You're very welcome. Yeah, Express LRS, it's the future. There's a radio behind me that you now can't see.
As well. Little Maytech one with the power monitoring as well. So
yeah, Maytech did some weird things with that Express LRS. I haven't heard the latest on that, because they decided they weren't going to play with the project anymore, didn't they? You hear about that?
Send hardware.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah,
Shame.
they weren't going to send hardware to the developers. I still miss the battery individual cell monitoring. You know, one of those little things that I sent you, Lee, from Free Sky.
Oh, the little things that you shove in.
Oh, the old smart
the little beepers.
LiPo. Yeah, they were epic.
You just used to fly around as it started beeping.
Yeah.
Land.
That one I sent you was open but unused. That has never been in an aircraft.
It's actually in my battery box now, because the really nice thing is it's the display on it is backlit. You know, it's like an LCD display, isn't it? So you can read it in all weathers, whereas the ones that I had before, you couldn't read if the sun was out. You see, this is the interesting thing as well. We've got to this. There's some things that aren't on the channel yet that will be out soon that I can't talk about, but LCD displays on radios. I still love LCD displays because I can read them, because if it's twilight, it's backlit, I can read them. If it's, in the 4 days in the UK where we get sunshine, I can still read it. Whereas with my TX16S with this beautiful bright screen with a touch and all the rest of it, I'm having to do that thing where you kind of have to lean over to get it in the shade so you can see the bloody thing.
Or the Beavis and Butthead classic of pulling your t-shirt over your head.
Yeah, that's it. So you can read the bloody thing. So there's a couple of radios coming out that actually have LCD displays in, which I am over the moon about, because it means that I can actually use them when the sun is out for those 4 days that we have sunshine in the UK. And I think we all got a little bit sucked into the color screens, in my humble opinion, because the only time we look at the screen is when we're picking the right bloody model. And then once we're flying, we've got bloody goggles on anyway, 99% of the time. We're not looking at the radio. It's audible alerts.
Unfortunately, that is all we've got time for.
We're not going to talk about 3D printing. We're not going to talk about BL Heli alternatives. We're not going to talk about NDAs.
I know. Well, I did wiggle some bloody 3D printing nest. I didn't even. Curry hasn't had the joys of Pet G yet, and
it's the future. Honestly, mate. Seriously.
Yeah. I tell you what.
Can you print with it next to you without like dying from the fumes though?
Yeah. It doesn't think like you've thrown some plastic in the bonfire.
Pet G spray paint the smooth side of glass from one of your wonderful Patreons. I may add, one of your personal Patreons, the wonderful Caroline Tyler.
Fab.
Yeah, like
just a light dusting of hairspray and it tacks up. The thing is, it prints. It's almost as easy to print as PLA, but it's almost as tough as ABS. So you get the best of both worlds, and it doesn't stink. And it's so nice. So I use PETG and Oh God, I've got myself mixed up. I use PLA Tough, which is actually really good and super easy, or the PETG, and they're the two filaments I use for the hobby all the time. That black thing there, that's got the antennas and made of several different pieces that the camera can't pick up at all, is PETG. I've just ordered my 3rd roll of it. It's fab, dead easy. 210 degrees for your hot end. Warm the bed to 50, 60 just to help it adhere for the first couple of layers, and it'll print like butter.
Yeah.
Can you wrap up the there was a question. Can I ask? Many people no, that's not it. Do you think is the drone industry trying to get rid of the hobby? I thought that was quite an interesting question.
Yeah, that's like a 5 to 10 minute answer is the kind of the full thing. No, I don't think it is, but then it depends what we're classifying as the drone part of the hobby. You know, you have lots of organizations that supply us as hobbyists who are also involved in the creation of drone systems used in theaters of war. Some people recently have been very, there's been lots of speculation about Rotor Riot and others. Interestingly, I'm aware that most people manufacturing motors, ESCs, flight controllers, frames, ready to fly, bind and fly, FPV systems, goggle manufacturers, have all been involved in some way, shape, or form. I think the issue now is that drone, because I hate the D word. I've always hated the D word. I've always had a massive issue with it because
we couldn't
drone
win.
is one
we
of
couldn't win.
You couldn't win because we were flying a couple of months ago. I'm flying a FPV wing actually, and an old lady stopped at the field on the gate, and I was spotting for my buddy, and she shouted over, "Is that a drone?" So I was like, "Adam, I'm just gonna bear with me, mate." So I was kind of trying to watch as I kind of backed up, trying not to step in any cow paths. Got to this gate and said to the lady, "No, it's a radio controlled airplane." And she was like, "Oh, it's okay then." But it's all in a name, right? So anyway, the drone thing. But I think in terms of where the money is for manufacturers of components, the hobby is no longer where they can make the most money. However, if you look at the best place to test new technology, hello, I think the hobby is a fantastic place for people like, 3-letter Chinese companies to release technology, to optimize it, get us to pay for the privilege, and then when it's optimized, use it in another way, shape, or form. I don't think they're trying to get rid of the hobby at all. I think if you look at the profit margins of supplying drone equipment to the hobby versus the profit margins of supplying drone equipment for other uses, it's completely a different scale. And it might end up that things get developed for other purposes that we get our hands on in the hobby and vice versa. But I don't think they're trying to kill the hobby at all. I think legislators are, but that's a whole nother thing.
Jockeys. All right. Yeah. If you want more of this, please forward your emails to Lee to get him to come back on LDO. So if you've enjoyed this, if you're an audio listener, have a look. It's live on YouTube every Thursday. But if you're a big fan of Lee, as we are, and enjoy and want him back even sooner to cover the other topics we had lined up, please go to his channel, link in the description. And then you'll notice there's an about and there's a contact thing. And if you prove that you're a human, you can email him and have the subject as "Let's Drone Out, get your ass back on there." He might return sooner than once a year. We will have to evict Stephen, but oh well. So if
One very, very quick question before we just finish up. The Son and Dad FPV has been asking a lot of stuff about 3D printing. I'm guessing the question about is it temp resistant was related to PETG. PETG is not a higher temperature filament as ABS, but the really nice thing about PETG is that it's still very stable at the higher temperatures, but crucially, it doesn't expand like ABS when it gets warm. So you don't have the issues with bed adhesion, but also as it gets hot, you don't find that the actual print changes dimensions, which is really quite cool as well. Sorry to interrupt you, Jack. Sorry, there's loads of really good questions in here we didn't get to.
I know. Where were you when we started the show, you people? Start on time. Also, massive shout out to Sin Jazz. Thank you for being the one person who watches on Twitch. I really appreciate that. Editor, I'm very sorry. It is the end of the show. Email Lee if you want him back on. You've been listening to Let's Throw Now. You've been joined by everyone's favourite curry kitten.
Goodbye.
Lee Painless360.
Hello.
And I've been Brighton Till I Fly. Gusto FBV, well done for being first. Johnny D RC, well done for being second. And Roddy Sale, well done for being third. This show's sponsored by our lovely Patreons. Link in the description if you want to become one. Get bonus stuff, ask direct questions to us, all that good stuff. Thank you, guys. We wouldn't survive without you. Thank you and good night. Bye.
Happy flying.